This week on Hope City Overtime, we take a look at the incredible story of Mary. We talk about Hope is Born. We had a phenomenal week and really a phenomenal year. So make sure you like, subscribe. Let's get it.
Welcome to Hope City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And this week, we have a great message to dive into, but it was a big week because last Wednesday night we had Hope is Born, second annual, and it was a fantastic night.
It was.
I feel like I talked to so many people in the lobby after that event and then in the lobby on Sunday who were like, yeah, I really had no idea what to expect, but I'm so glad that I went. I feel like that's kind of the vibe. So I wanted to just talk about it a little bit. And my first question is for you, Pastor John. This was kind of your brainchild, like maybe a year and a half ago, you showed up at a staff meeting. I don't actually remember, but I'm assuming this is what happened. And we're just like, we're going to do something for Christmas that feels like us and is not something that, it's not a Christmas pageant. It's not what you've seen a lot of other churches do. Those things are great. But what really prompted you to do this and why do we do Hope is Born?
Oddly enough, it was a late night drive through the city during the Christmas season a couple years back. Not even connected to that year, but a couple years back, I was driving through the city at night. And there's something about the city when Christmas hits, the lights, the weather, the crispness in the air, watching everybody run around with their coats and
I do remember that. You did talk about being bundled up a lot.
There was so that is something that's somewhat unique to a city during Christmas that I've always appreciated. And then we've been just on and on our story of both what was Center City and what was Hope Church, which is now Hope City. A lot of our story is wrapped up in the skyline and just God breaking the heart of our founding pastors, both Mike Fields and David Dukeson, for the heart of the city. So it just made sense to figure out how we can use this Christmas season as an opportunity to pull people out, people who maybe wouldn't be accustomed to walking into the church on a given day, but to spend some time attracting people to this moment where we get a chance to celebrate the hope of Christmas. So we started just talking and leaning into the idea, well, what do we do and what do we have to communicate that hope? And really it just kind of shook itself out. We have people who have these incredible stories of life change that's happened through experiencing the hope that's found in Jesus. What would it look like to put some of them on the stage to communicate those truths and stories? And we have a bunch of people who are gifted and skilled in the creative arts, whether it's spoken word or dance or music.
Or lighting design.
And tech.
Yeah, so many things you don't even think about.
Yeah, so what would it look like to put those people together and dream a little bit? And we did, legitimately, it was a real skeleton thought. And then we brought all of creatives in the room and said, hey, let's figure out what this looks like. The first year we did it at the Charlotte Ballet, which was fun.
So fun.
And then last week we did it at CPCC's Parr Theater, which was beautiful. And it just gives people a chance to come out to the city, have a night where we're celebrating and lifting up the name of Jesus, invite their friends and family. We got a bunch of that. A bunch of people introduced me to their uncles and aunts and cousins and friends and coworkers, and give them a chance to respond to the hope that's found in Jesus. So,
yeah. One of the things I love about Hope is Born when I'm talking to people is you can hear the story of Jesus being born, and we talk about that at Christmas, and we do those Christmas pageants, and I loved being in the Christmas pageant as a little girl, but it can almost become a nice story that we like the tradition of, and we lose some of the relevance that baby born in a manger has for us today. And so I love the way that people get up and they share their stories, and it's connected. Like as we're kind of walking through the story of Christmas, people are saying, this is how Jesus found me. This is how Jesus met me when I was far and wondering, and no, I didn't see a star in the sky, but he was still drawing me to him. I just think it's so powerful because it does bring those things together when sometimes we just kind of focus, or at least I just focus on the story and forget like, no, this matters still today.
Absolutely.
So this year we had 3 testimonies, 3 people share their stories. And I just thought I would ask both of you, what are some of the things you've been maybe pondering since hearing them? And we all heard them a couple times. Actually, no, we didn't. They didn't all do them in rehearsal. I heard them a couple times. But are there any things from that, or maybe from a lyric in a song or something that now that we're, half a week out and we've all slept a little bit, apologies to the parent of the young child who has slept a little less than the rest of us. Are there some things that you've just kind of been thinking about that God put on your heart that night?
Dr. Kevin, I keep calling him Dr. Kevin because he is a doctor. But he's so humble. He just kept telling me, Emma, just call me Kevin. And I said, no, you earned that title, which he talked about that in his story. His story just had me in tears. I mean, I absolutely love Melissa and her story always brings me to tears, but this is my first time meeting Dr. Kevin. What really stood out to me, and I think this theme has been kind of being woven through our church for ever since women's retreat. I just
I see what you did there.
You see what I did
Our
there?
tapestry retreat.
Our tapestry
the theme
retreat
has been
woven.
Just want to call out your brilliance.
I love being able to hear Dr. Kevin, many, many, many years removed from this moment where he's sitting in his 1990 something Honda car as a freshman in college. And now, years later, on the other side of that, and to see the faithfulness of God and how God really weaves everything together. Yeah. I think of every single high school student, every single college student that has been there, that has been in the midst of, I just messed everything up. This is not what I thought you had for me. And then on the other side to see it all come to fruition. It was such a beautiful reminder. And it was such practical is the wrong word.
No,
but it wasn't like God came and sat down next to him.
It wasn't a burning bush.
It wasn't a burning bush. It's not like the presence of the Holy Spirit and it could have, it could have happened, but it didn't in this moment. And even still, you can see the hand of God on his life. I just think was such a brilliant picture of the hand of God in our lives.
It's funny. That's one of the testimonies that I've been hearing consistently from people. That's the one they related to, right? We often think that it's these stories of miraculous encounters when the truth is, I loved his pictures. I was struggling with my grades and God was faithful.
Yeah,
and so many people were like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm at, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
I'm a little biased, but for me, it was my mom. I mean, she messed me up. She took that whole moment and did a phenomenal job painting a picture, one that I've never really heard to that extent about my grandmother. And she did it with such grace. I know she was nervous, but she did such a phenomenal job. And then just to be able to some degree, paint the picture of God's faithfulness as I got up on stage and was able to kiss her on the forehead and said, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, that was
to just kind of paint the picture that I still believe that God changes generational trajectories. And I think sometimes we have given up on the idea. I think also we become a little self-contained in the way that we think. So it's all about us. But I think my mom did a great job painting the picture of, because God brought transformation to my grandmother and because she modeled what it meant to surrender her life, I was brought into a world and into an environment where I was able to make that decision. I raised my kids in this, and now, she sat there and talked about her grandkids and her great-grandkids, and she was so, you could just see the pride coming off of her. She was so proud of her family, which I love, and I think is super healthy. And then just to be able to come on stage right after and just paint that picture that God is faithful to change, not just you, but generations to come. And I think that added a little bit of weight to the room for those people who may be struggling with, I'm not good enough. Why does it matter? I mean, this could be the moment that your family is changed forever. And that's just to the glory and grace of God. Yeah.
And I think I loved just remembering that when you hear, like you shared many times on stage, that are you third or fourth generation pastor?
Just depends how you count it, but third would be safe.
And so like someone can hear that and just think like, oh, that family's different, and almost discount it. Like that could never be my family. But to go back to that origin story and to hear no one goes through life without moments
Yeah.
and seasons of, we all have deep need for Jesus every moment, but just that despair of your grandmother, right? I don't know why generations are hard for my brain today, that was turned around when we've seen your parents, and we've been blessed to know a lot of Hernandez family members, but to see that origin story was really powerful.
Yeah.
That like, there is a reason that your family is different now, and that could be true of anyone's family.
Yeah, I'm careful in how I communicate that, because it's not a guarantee that you give your life to the Lord and everybody in your family just gives their lives to the Lord. What it really has done for us as a family is it's created a baseline. So what I mean by that is, as I grew, my brothers and sisters grew, my cousins have grown, and some of them still have not surrendered their lives to Jesus. We're believing that that's not, that's not forever, that they will. But what we have found is what happens, because we all have our crisis. We all have those moments that we get to, because the baseline has been faith. Often what's left when you strip everything away is that baseline of faith that you were given as a child. Even when there's some issues with how you were raised, because it didn't mean that we get it perfect, or that my parents got it perfect, or that their siblings got it perfect. And my parents come from large families. So we're talking 13 brothers and sisters on one side, I think 11 on the other. So we're talking like this
Very large family.
this huge implication. And my dad's story is very similar to my mom's story. So I say all that to say, it's not that there's a guarantee, but there is a baseline you're setting.
Yeah.
And as generations continue to maturate and grow, the hope is that we all remember and keep consistent to that baseline, so that our kids and our kids' kids and our kids' kids' kids have that opportunity. When everything's stripped away, it's what lasts.
Yeah. I love that. I was really touched by Melissa's story. One of the things, it wasn't actually her part of the story that really impacted me, but she talks about these three women, and particularly one of them who prayed for her faithfully. And in the way that I interpret it and hear it in her story, we're almost sassy in the determination that no, you may be going through all of this stuff. You may look to the world like you are as far away from God as possible, but I believe that there will be a day where you love Jesus like I love Jesus. Just the power of that prayer and the power of not giving up on people. I had the opportunity to talk to someone in the lobby on Sunday, totally not related to Melissa's story, but they were sharing that they have a family member who has just recently started coming to church, like in the last 3 weeks. And they said, I never would have believed, I had given up asking. I just never thought that this family member would be interested. And then all of a sudden, what seems like out of the blue, here they are. And the people that I was talking to, they had prayed for years and years and years. And there's just power in the faithfulness of prayer and in not giving up on people that I just thought was all over Melissa's story.
Yeah, if you were with us on the podcast last week, that was a conversation point. How do you navigate life with people who are living in that place? And I thought she did a great job of answering that question in that presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other Hope is Born thoughts that you want to share?
I just big love to the whole team. We're talking well over 60 volunteers to make something like that happen. Between the choir and the worship leaders and the people who were reading passages, to people who were telling their stories, to the guys who did the spoken word, to all the team that spent quite a bit of time putting this together. We can't do this. This isn't a professional production where we're just paying everybody to get stuff done. This doesn't happen if it's not for the heart of this church's and they're bent towards generosity with their time and talents. And this was a earmark of that for sure.
Yeah. And shout out to Pastor Joey, who was the point person for all of it.
Yeah.
I'll say it. So many people did so much, but I think of Joey as a shock absorber when he directs a lot of our big events. So if you didn't realize that, a lot of times Pastor Joey is the steadiness behind a big event and everyone's playing their part, but he's the one who's like, when you get to the bumps, he's absorbing that shock so that everyone else can still stay in their lane and navigate all of that. And he did a
Shock
brilliant job.
absorber.
That's
I like
a
that.
really
That's
good-
description.
That's my leadership metaphor. I use that, and that's the thing I think of the most.
That's phenomenal.
But
Yes.
anyway, Joey's a great shock absorber.
He is really good at that. I thought it was just such a I always look forward to Hope is Born because I feel like there are so many people in the church with such creative gifts
Yeah.
that are like, okay, maybe I can't sing or maybe I can't do this. Like, what can I do? And then you put somebody like Emily on stage to dance and you just see the creative gifts of people and how it's always one of my favorite events just because the creativity of our church is just insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think we've really just kind of scratched the surface too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh. I was telling someone afterwards, I feel like one day we're going to be doing the 25th annual Hope is Born and like look back on these days fondly, but also be like, man, we had no idea.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Hope is Born was awesome. If you didn't get to see it this year, I'm sorry you have to wait a whole year, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
My parents came this year after hearing me talk about how they should have been there
Last year.
last year over and over. And now we move on to Sunday. We had a great Sunday. I even hate to say a guest speaker because he's more like family than a guest. Like, it's like extended family that came back to visit. Pastor Mike Fields was here, and you did a great job on Sunday. But in case someone missed it and they're newer to the family, would you explain just kind of briefly who he is in relation to Hope City Church?
Yeah, so 16 years ago in North Charlotte, a group of people, just led by the hand of God, decided to plant what was called Hope Church. 9 months into that planting of Hope Church, under the direction of Mike Field, a young man named David Dukeson was working alongside Mike. And 9 months in, they decided it was time for David to step out and plant Center City Church. So that's our origin story as a church. And then 5 years ago, the incredible people at Center City Church voted on bringing Jess and I in as their lead pastor, which is one of the honors of my life. And then 6 months ago, Mike Field had an opportunity to be moved to the district office where he served serving as assistant superintendent for our denomination. And that meant that the leadership of Hope was vacant. And at that point, I was approached about what it would look like to bring these two churches back together to be one church with two expressions. So Mike Field's influence in our church is been one, I call him one of our two founding fathers. So it was great to have him. Mm-hmm. And I know it's only been 6 months, but the amount of change that's happened in the church in 6 months could be a little disorienting. But my goodness, he was just a blessing and a breath of fresh air. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people enjoyed. I thought he had a word for the house.
Yeah,
Man, what
he
a
really
word for the
did.
house.
He talked about Mary, and it's funny that you mentioned the women's retreat earlier because he used a passage that Emma preached at the women's retreat, kind of in different ways, but also a very similar thread. So I'm glad that you're here today. Yeah, look at us. But one of the things he talked about is how Mary was just going through her life, and then there was a moment of divine interruption that changed everything. And he talked about how that happens for all of us at different times. So I wanted to ask you guys if you remember a time in your life where there was a divine interruption that totally rerouted. Like, I'm not talking about the gentle leading in a direction, which also happens, but more like one of those Gabriel moments. It's like, you think your life's going to go this way, but bam, here comes Jesus.
You want to go first?
I guess I can go first. I feel like I always go back. I need like new stories.
Just keep living.
Yeah. No, I always go back to this moment. I was 18 and I had just started going to somebody's youth group. And I had like sweet little moments with God where I was just like, I don't really know what's going on. For context, I had never been to church before. I didn't have any community. Like, I didn't even know anybody. I had nobody in my circle of influence over the age of 18 except for my teachers. So like there was no concept of mentors or just people. Like I didn't have any of that. And so I'd gone to one of our spring retreats that our youth group did at the time. And I remember standing in the back of this retreat while all the adult staff are introducing themselves, and then the like graduated staff, I guess, like the high schoolers that have like moved on or introducing themselves. And I just remember saying, God, I don't know what you're doing here, but I want to be a part of it. That opened the floodgate. And that was one of like I think just like a kinder moment. But then I remember going back to school the next week and being in the bathroom and washing my hands and just feeling this overwhelming feeling of like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like I was in love with just God. I was in love with God, but I think I was also in love with like the newfound community and newfound freedom and all of these things. And I was like, I have to have this for the rest of my life. I thought my life was going to go one way. I thought I was going to join the Peace Corps. I thought I was going to go to Winthrop University and get a degree in anthropology, which is not the store, which I was sad to find out about that. I had a 2.5 GPA, so I wasn't really that smart.
Still higher than Dr. Kevin's that semester.
right.
But he was in college
God
and I was in
can do
high school, so
anything.
it's a little bit different. But yes, God can do anything. Me and Dr. Kevin actually talked about that. And God changed my life all through that prayer that I prayed. And all through meeting me in my high school bathroom while I was washing my hands. I ended up going to ministry school. I ended up, working for my youth pastor. So I thought my life was going to go one way, and he just completely interrupted it. And he still does now to this day, but never as dramatic as that.
Did you wrestle at all with that, or were you pretty quick
No.
to be like, okay, God?
I think now I would wrestle. I think and I say that now because I do feel more established in my life. I think I was 18. I was so just desperate for something that I had no clue what that something was. And so when I found it and he was like, I want to change your life, I was like, bet, like we're on it. Like, let's do this. There have been other times where the Lord has told me to do something and I'm probably not has been as willing to, but that is the clearest picture that I can never see in my life where I'm just like, whatever you want, Lord, let's just do it. So,
Yeah, it's a great story.
What about you?
I think this has happened quite a few times for me, but the one that has come to mind over the last several days, it was almost like a 2-part disruption. But when I was in college, I was studying English literature, creative writing. I loved the Lord, but I was still very much like, I either want to be a teacher or a writer, maybe both. I was looking at study abroad programs in London, and I just felt the Lord at a worship service tell me not to study abroad. And it was really weird and didn't make sense. And yet it was clear enough that it was like, I need to actually weigh this. And I remember talking to my parents about it and just being like, I don't believe this is what God has for me, which was kind of strange because if you know me, you know that I love travel. Like this was my first opportunity to live abroad. I eventually got to live overseas in other times, but a few months later is when I got a phone call that I was diagnosed with a health issue. Like it was something that my mom actually kind of sensed when I told her that. She was like, she didn't tell me at the time, but she's like, someone's going to get sick. Like there's a reason. And so for me, it was a disruption that was not what I expected. I had to withdraw from school for part of that semester, move back home with my parents, just go to lots of different doctor's appointments and adjust to a lot of different medicines. And looking back, that time where I was forced to just kind of be back home, be in bed a lot, spend a lot of time with the Lord because I didn't have other time, it deepened my love for him and trust for him in a way that I don't think I realized was happening then. But when I came back, and my college was awesome. Like they worked with me. I ended up graduating on time. Like everything was great. So when I jumped back into life, the focus of it was very much, I'm living for the Lord and whatever he has for me.
Yeah.
I'm willing. I was still majoring in the same thing. Like no major shift had happened from the outside, but I feel like that was actually the disruption that changed everything. That was just like, I trust you even if I don't understand. I recognize my weakness, but I also recognize your strength. So it's not kind of a Gabriel appearing story, but it was a big disruption that I'm super grateful for on the other side of it.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had several. Most of them revolve around ministry trajectory and just kind of, I was studying to be a graphic designer. That's what I went to school for. Did that for.
So we have anthropologist, writer, graphic designer. Those were our plans for ourselves.
And actually graduated and was working as a did some work as a creative director for a virtual reality company. And we did that for a while. And then I actually came back and started teaching at the collegiate level a computer graphics and design course, because back then there wasn't a lot of, it was still a relatively new field. Had a moment with one of the students that led to the conversation about their faith journey, and was able to pray for them. And just, it led to a moment in the car where the Lord was asking, do you want to do this with the rest of your life? I had said no to ministry for so long that when I finally said yes, I was convinced that I just had to do it differently, because I just saw it done. And being a PK and living in a pastor's home, my dad was my hero. And a lot of the people he brought around him just approached ministry in a weird way. And I just wanted to make sure that my heart was right before the Lord. My dad modeled what that looked like. So I always wanted to kind of live like my dad lived. And one of those thoughts was always, I'm never really worried about what was next. I just want to be faithful with what I had in my hand.
Yeah.
So almost every shift in ministry had to be a disruption moment, because I was never going to have a plan. It was never going to be, I'm going to be this for this long and then this and that. I don't have a problem with people having those plans, so hear me when I say that. But I was a middle school pastor. I could have died happy a middle school pastor. Like, that was my focus, building a middle school ministry, loving on those families and those kids, with developing teams, all that stuff. So then when it was time for
Now you get to be a middle school parent.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
For a little bit longer,
For a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But moving from that to the high school, or being a lead youth pastor, was really another disruption. I was prepared to kind of actually even move on from the idea of ministry full time, and the Lord had other plans that required a moment of disruption. My journey here in North Carolina, really, I wasn't looking for a job. That wasn't the thought. I was going to live in Fort Lauderdale my whole life and kind of do the youth ministry thing until the Lord closed the door. So it required some disruption in the form of Rick Ross.
The pastor, not the rapper.
Yeah. Seems like every time I say that name, that has to preface that. Yeah.
It is, because when I first started going to church and you told me that my lead pastor's name was Rick Ross, I had a moment.
Yeah.
So
and then the shift here to moving from us executive pastor to lead pastor at Center City, that was a shift, a disruption moment. Again, God using leaders at the right time, him breaking my heart, me not knowing what that looked like and why he was doing that. I was not putting resumes, but contemplating putting resumes out for different positions, because I knew my time as executive pastor kind of had a little bit of a clock on it. Jess and I were talking about cities, and we just couldn't get Charlotte out of our head. And then
Surprise.
our lead pastor at the time to call me up and be like, my heart's breaking for Charlotte, and it's got your name all over it. So all of those were disruptions that you just have to be mindful of. The hard part with a lot of people in their faith journey is that it's not that the disruptions don't happen, is that we don't respond to them in the right way. Emma said something earlier that I loved. Now she would be a little bit more tentative because she's more established. I also think that some of that is our maturation in the faith. Sometimes we don't allow for those disruptions because we explain them away. And quite honestly, it's because we're also comfortable. Whereas when you were newer in the faith, he was everything.
Yeah.
So if he said jump, you weren't calculating the cost. You were just jumping. And I think that for some people, one of the things that are tough is if an angel showed up today, you would be on TikTok trying to figure out if other people have experienced the same thing and what did they do to navigate that. Like, that's the way that we navigate life, as humorous as that sounds. We drop it in the chat GTP and see how probable it is versus
Was this an angel?
Yeah, versus the response of Mary, which I love. And I think that that's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah.
Again, not that I'm advocating jumping out on every whim, but I am saying if God shows up and speaks, I just promise you can explain it away if you want.
Yeah.
I have one of my most prized possessions is a painting that a dear friend painted for me. And she painted it to be mobile because at the time I was living overseas, and it's actually, it's not like a picture. It's modern art, and I don't have the vocabulary to talk about it, to give it credit, but
It's a canvas, right?
Yeah, it's on a canvas, and it's basically the story of the gospel intertwined with the story of my life. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't know me and didn't know the artist or had it explained. And one of the things that I have done just to remind myself is that it is on my wall with push pins. It's not framed. It has stayed something that at any moment
Can be mobile.
God could say, go, and I could take that and go. Obviously, I would also leave it behind if God said, but for me, that's like, I've even thought about it in the last couple of weeks because I'm feeling so drawn to my neighborhood that I'm like, maybe I could frame it now because I'm like putting down roots, and I've felt that check in my spirit that's like, no, you need this reminder, like even if you're here for the rest of your life. And so it could be that is helpful for someone else. Like, and it's just right there. If you've been in my home, you've seen it. You have no idea what it is. You're probably like, that cheap woman needs to get a frame. But it is that reminder every day. Nope, it can go off the wall in a moment.
So much of the Christmas narrative is mobile. I love that word because I think it matters. The wise men traveling, the shepherds traveled, Mary and Joseph temporary lodging, like the story.
Yeah, then they like fled to Egypt and
So Paul speaks about this, or paints this picture of tent pegs, and that we are not to establish roots in this world because we're just foreigners, that this isn't home. And I think that the story of the Christmas narrative is critical, because what we have done is we've placed our hope. The phrase that we used at the beginning of last year was, we anchor upward.
That was 2023.
2023.
Crazy.
2020.
That's
Yeah,
2023.
2023. So we anchor upward, which in essence means that the root system of our lives is shaped on the person of Jesus and on heaven. And what that allows me to do is I move as the Spirit moves. So nothing holds me.
Yeah.
And I think that that's critical in 2024. I think it's a part of the Christmas narrative that's lost.
I also think it's these stories, are all of our stories. I think it's such a great reminder when I'm trying to form my thought, because I think it's a powerful image that God doesn't leave you stuck for so long. Or if you're in the midst of something, or if you think something is forever, the only thing that is forever and eternal is Him. And so if you're in the midst of a situation, or if you feel like there is nothing, or if you just feel like your life is like, this is it. Like, if I remember being in college, and this is not to go off, but I remember I was in a situation, and I remember just being like, is this it? Is this the rest of my life? And then having this moment of, no, the Spirit of God is constantly moving and constantly shaping. So this is not it. And I love that. I love that you don't frame it, even though I love that piece of art and I know exactly what you're talking about.
A frame.
Yes. I remember when you first told me, and I was like, I'm going to get her a frame. And then also being like, no, that's not the point of it.
Well, I think for a lot of believers, that's one of the current trends in thinking is I just need to be rooted. So what I'm going to do is root to a city, or I'm going to root to a person. And I think that's misleading. That's how the world navigates rooting.
Yeah.
We don't root that way.
Yeah, we root ourselves to Christ. And there's nothing wrong with, like, I'm very connected in my neighborhood, so I don't want it to sound like...
So what's the difference between connection and rooting?
That I know if you uproot something, it dies.
Yeah.
So I am rooted to the Lord. And as long as He's with me, which He has promised to be no matter where, like, that's good. That connection, it might be difficult. Like, I'm thinking about plants now, and you can transplant something and it might need a little extra care and attention for a little bit, but once it gets reestablished in its new place, like, it's going to be fine. So it would be painful for me to be moved from my community, but it wouldn't kill me because my source of life is the Lord. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. I also think that you and I are it's so different, because I could have heard this conversation that we're having a few years ago and been like, all right, I'm just going to leave, like, peace out. Like, I think people that are more, I think you could hear this conversation and also think that we're telling you to, like, pack up, leave at the drop of a hat. But I think it's living in the middle of it, living rooted, but also like not living so rooted that you're immovable, but not living in a place where your spontaneity is your crutch.
Yeah, because you can get rooted to moving, right? So then I think the important part is understanding that a portion of rooting into a relationship with Jesus is being connected to people.
Yeah.
But being connected and being rooted are two different things.
Yeah.
I love this conversation. I'm glad you're here today, Emma, because you are the resident human at this table who's been pregnant. And you can't avoid talking about it because Mike went all in on the pregnancy metaphor.
Waddle and everything.
Yeah, I was having flashbacks.
But I like, as much as we've talked about the Christmas story, kudos to him because this was an angle that I have not ever heard taken that far. And he talked particularly about when we say yes to Jesus, it brings about stretching. It makes us walk differently. It makes us more careful about what we ingest. Were there any parts of that metaphor that particularly like hit you in a new way? I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, this was the story that I camped out in my entire pregnancy. Because it is such a picture of pregnancy, just the stretching and the fighting, and you're going through something that even though other people have experienced it in different ways, no one experiences the way that you're currently experiencing it. And you won't ever experience it like that again if you do. Like, it's very nuanced or whatever. The thing that I have always just been so in love with about this story is that, Mary got pregnant. The angel told her what was going to happen. She said yes, whatever. Cut to Joseph. Joseph's not pregnant, right? Joseph's not feeling any of this. Mary knew all the implications, all the things, and Mary did not go to Joseph and fight and plead her case that the Lord had put something in her and he saw fit to care about every single detail and even telling Joseph about what was going to happen. She didn't have to fight it. She didn't have to explain it. She didn't have to tell, that the Lord just lined it up. I don't know if this goes in with your question, but I just love this picture of when God gives you something. I feel like I had a professor once that made us all scream, "I'm pregnant with purpose." I'm so sorry. It's everyone on the internet today. But I think that, have you been pregnant before and never been pregnant, or maybe you're a man and that's just not something that's you'll never be able to experience. We have all experienced what it means to be pregnant with something from the Lord, like an idea, a prayer, a prophet, like whatever, and just what that does to your body, to your mind, to the seasons that you're in. Yeah, I'm sorry. I lost total track of what your question was.
Totally
You triggered
fine.
something.
Yeah.
This is my favorite story in the Bible.
Yeah.
This
I love that.
is like, it's just everything for me.
I think his observation about stretching, because I do think sometimes we think the hope of Christmas is that we find comfort.
Yeah.
And he was quick to be like,
Tidings of comfort and joy.
yeah. He's like, slow down.
The
Like,
joy's there.
the joy's there, but there are moments of discomfort. Like when
Heavy moments of discomfort.
something is birthed within you, there's that stretching. And I think that was challenging specifically to our current climate, like within the scope of the people in the room who might have heard and somewhat come to the understanding that saying yes to Jesus means I'm always comfortable. And I thought he was great by saying, no, you're not always comfortable. Like this is going to be challenging. But to your point, he also mentioned, and God will work out everything.
Yeah.
Like he's got you, but it doesn't mean it's not discomforting at points. And I think in order to birth anything that's worth anything, you got to navigate through this season of discomfort and seasons, because there's that. And I think that was the crux of the message. Like for me, at least, that God is still birthing things in you and through you. You just have to learn how to deal with the discomfort.
Yeah. It was like a side joke, but he said it both times I heard the message about waddling.
Yeah.
Because like he was making the point that you walk differently. Like when you walk with the Lord, it changes the way that you walk. And I think in my mind, I'm good with not being comfortable all the time. Like I've lived long enough to accept that. I wouldn't say I'm good with it. It's still not easy, but yeah, I get that. That's not hard. But I think I've always thought of like when we walk differently and when people notice that, they're going to see like how great we're walking or like how well we're navigating everything. And that picture of waddling just like hit me.
Yeah.
Because she was still waddling with purpose. Like it's because she was doing something incredible, but you look a little silly. Like because you're uncomfortable, because you're being stretched, because you're being asked to do something bigger than you. And it was just like a comforting, like, no, sometimes God might be calling you to waddle.
Well, let's go a step further. If we as a church don't make space for people to waddle,
Yeah.
if we project a picture that waddling is somehow an issue of sin, or of a lack of discipline, because I mean, how many times have you heard that, right? You're in the middle of a struggle. That's birthing something the Lord is doing. Now, again, I want to be clear. We're not talking about sin.
Right.
But there are struggles that you have to walk through. And people will say, well, it's not biblical for you to be tired. Well, I mean, there are seasons where the Lord is birthing something in me, and that's the season he's calling me to. Or there's not, you seem a little hyper-focused on a thing. Well, maybe that's because it's where the Lord has me in that season. I think sometimes if the objective is to project this idea that I'm walking fine and everything's fine and I can't showcase the waddle, if we're doing life well with women who are pregnant, we're quick to make accommodations like, hey, you can sit here. Let me help you through the door. Let me, how can we help? Like, we're okay with, because we understand what's on the other side of that birthing process. I think we have to be okay watching people navigate with discomfort and not trying to hyper spiritualize it and explain it away. No, you're just discomfort because God has birthed something in you. Like, let's embrace the season. And then as a community, come around. Let me help you work through some of it.
Yeah, I even think there's something there. When you're first pregnant, you don't waddle.
Yeah.
When, like for those first, I don't know. It's different with everybody, but for the first like 5-6 months, I was like, I mean, I'm really sick, but I'm not waddling. Like, it was like a badge of honor. Like, I haven't gotten there. And I think it's like a progression. Like, the longer you go, you can hide it for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you get to that like full on pregnant, like,
I'm not wearing mom jeans. I'm not wearing
I'm
pregnancy
not going to wear
jeans.
pregnancy clothes. That's a gimmick. And then you get there and you're like, oh,
Where's all the, give me all the stretch.
somebody give me an ice pack.
Yeah.
It's just like you can hide it for a little bit because in some spaces, to be a pregnant woman, it's uncomfortable to be pregnant in public. And to think about that as the matter of the church, like, are we making it, it's okay for the first few months. It's okay for a little bit. But then when it's obvious and it's inconveniencing other people and it's like, oh my gosh, we get it already. There's stuff here. I
thought it was a great picture.
Yeah. So he kind of brings all of this around to talk about the power of Mary's yes. When she said yes to God, that wasn't something that just impacted her. Yes, it did change the way that she walked and the way that she moved and the way that she stretched, but it changed all of humanity. And we may not be called in the same way that Mary was exactly, but Mike made the fantastic point that our yes to God it's not just about us. Like, in his goodness, it is about us, and he transforms us and he does bring us that joy and that peace and that hope, but it's also about the people around us. And so I feel like we talk about this a lot because this is also, I was like, Mike, you're preaching my heart language. Like, I'm always about who's around you, who can you share with, who can you talk to, who can you love? Like, but I do think sometimes it's hard to know where to start. Like with Mary, she didn't really have a choice. Like, she did say yes, but then that baby was going to grow no matter what. And then he was going to do his thing. And it can be hard to look at the metaphor. And that's where I think it can break down for some people is like, okay, I want to say yes to God and I want my yes to impact the people around me. But what does that look like when I'm not physically carrying a baby? Like, so what would you say to someone who's wanting to be like, how do I say yes? Like, how do I move forward in this? How do I share this hope with people around me? I know that's a big question and it's different for everyone.
First of all, you got to trust who you're hearing. We're going to talk quite a bit about relationship in the next several months as we consider spiritual formation, not to give away where we're going in January, but what the heck.
This is our last podcast of the year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
See you in January.
Look at that.
But stick around, we're not done.
Yeah. So you got to trust in the voice that you're hearing, right? And that requires time, energy, and effort in relationship. Like, even from a really practical place, if you wanted to get to know Emma and trust what she's saying, you have to do the work of relationship. And I think the work of relationship when it comes to your relationship with the Lord, of course, is what spiritual formation and disciplines look like. And we'll talk in 2024 about that. And I can't wait. It's going to be great. But
2025.
2025, golly. But with that said, I think for so many people, one of the hesitations to yes is that it's going to shift some things. And so ultimately, you got to get over you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Paul is so adamant about this idea of, no, I'm dying to myself. I no longer live. Christ lives through me.
Which is so what's happening when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't die, but like that baby takes over all of your systems.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I keep looking at you. You're
Yeah.
not the only human who's ever been pregnant.
I am
The only one at this table.
at the table.
So I say that because, with the Waddle, I keep going back to the Waddle. I'm reminded of this incredible family that just had twins at North. And poor thing, I saw her the week before and she came in and she's got a belly strap on. Carrying twins is totally different. And well, I don't know about totally, but different in a lot of ways.
I've heard this very different.
I mean, she had one baby was 7 pounds, the other one was 6.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And she, first of all, just big shot out. She
Yeah.
navigated that with such like grace. It was incredible. Anyway, even just to watch her walking in through the lobby, there's a point where you can't look cool anymore. Like you got to get over yourself. And again, she did it with such grace. She embraced the discomfort of it, embracing the season. This is what it is. And I think if we can't get there, it's tough for us to say yes. Just so break that down really practical. You're sitting across a cubicle from somebody who you see every day. You know they need Jesus. You know they're struggling. The Spirit of God prompts you. All it requires is your yes to step into that, but you got to get over yourself. If you don't get over yourself, that person is never going to have that conversation with you. Like you're never going to get beyond what happens if they say no and now I got to look at them every week.
Yeah.
What happens if I extend this invitation and they tell me that they have some weird Eastern religion that they're a part of and I don't know how to answer the questions that they have? Unfortunately, we don't fully trust, and I think that this was what Mike did and communicated brilliantly. We don't fully trust that God is on the other end working it all out.
Yeah.
So if we can trust him and get over ourselves, those are the two things I think that allows us more and more to say yes.
Yeah.
But we got to get over ourselves.
Yeah. Because you also look really dumb if you're 9 months pregnant and trying to still act like you walk the same way and wear the same clothes. Like,
Yeah, it doesn't work.
yeah, because if God is really directing your life, you're going to look different no matter what. So if you try to still act like nothing's changed, you just kind of look silly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's taking the metaphor too far. But
No, it's true because those pants probably don't fit anymore. This is your sign, my pregnant friends, buy new pants. You won't regret it. But I also think it's a daily thing.
Yeah,
I
agree.
think it can be, okay, so you're not pregnant. You're not waking up every single morning feeling kicks and you don't have to use the bathroom every 10 minutes. For pregnant people, they have a constant reminder that they're pregnant. I think there's no difference. When I first got pregnant, it could be easy to forget that I was pregnant. I would do something or I would go for a run and I would have to say like, hey, you need to kind of scale it back again. Even though I can't feel this baby inside of me yet, I have to start even now, like in the early stages, reminding myself that this is happening to me. And I think likewise with the Lord, every single day yes, Lord, every single day, like you have to remind yourself because it can be really, really easy to get in the habit of not saying yes, of not surrendering. And then a few days that you don't and you've completely lost sight or lost track or you feel like you're thrown out into the waves and you don't know what's going on and you just didn't say yes. It's just very practically so. Saying yes every single morning to the thing that he's given you or the thing that he's put in your heart is a really practical reminder.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
well, we are wrapping up Hope City Overtime. I almost called it Hope is Born. For the year. We'll be back in January. But where are we kind of headed for the rest of this Christmas season?
Oh, I thought you were talking about January. I'm so in January right
I
now.
know,
I'm super
which is a
excited.
great thing.
Yeah. No, we wrap this all up.
You can do a preview of January if you want to.
Okay, I would rather do that. But let me just quickly, we're going to wrap up.
Hope will be born.
Hope will be born. Hope is here. Hope is calling.
We're talking about the shepherds on Sunday.
Yeah, we're talking about the shepherds on Sunday, which I'm getting my head around a little bit. They're a unique
They're my
bunch.
favorite. Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
Simeon and Anna have just been in my gut this whole Christmas season. Anyway, so incredible. Can't wait. One of my favorite services of the year is Christmas Eve. So at both locations, one's happening. The North Expression is at 6 and the West Expression's at 7. I don't know. You can, I guess, be a Christmas Eve junkie and come to both. That's fine. But I love that little kids in their pajamas and it's just fun. We have a good time. So that's the rest of the year. And then we've just really been impressed by this idea of spiritual formations and disciplines. Like, what does it look like to be a disciple? And so we're going to take a look at the Master Disciple Builder and kind of glean some lessons on what it means to allow his Spirit to build us and then equip us to build others, because that's what our call is, to be disciple builders ourselves. So it's going to be a great year.
Yeah. So we can't wait to see you. We'll be at it every Sunday. We're not taking any Sundays off. I know a couple people have asked about that. We'll be at Hope City West at 9 and 11:30, Hope City North at 10:15, and then that Christmas Eve service is 6 at North, 7 at West. We can't wait to see you then.